So what exactly is it that makes a grilled cheese ultimate? Gordon Ramsay has an ultimate grilled cheese video. He just uses really expensive cheese, which he then completely fails to melt while burning the bread over an open fire. Doesn't seem that ultimate to me. About 10 years ago, Chef John from foodwishes.com had a stroke of genius by putting some cheese on the top and bottom of the outside of the sandwich to make an inside-out grilled cheese. Chef John never claimed that his sandwich was ultimate, but at the time I thought it was absolutely brilliant. For Jamie Oliver's ultimate grilled cheese sandwich video, he makes a grilled cheese that's, well, to be fair, pretty similar to the one that Chef John makes. But really, cheese on the top and bottom, is that the best we can do? It's after midnight, I'm hungry, so let's take this trend to its logical conclusion and completely encase the entire sandwich in toasty melted cheese. Oh yeah, let's get snacking. Basic white supermarket bread is the standard for grilled cheese. You can really use any kind of bread that you want. For this though, it's best if it doesn't have big holes in it, so a ciabatta or a sourdough might not work quite as well. You can use pretty much whatever cheese you like on the inside of the sandwich. I'm using a blend of mozzarella for stretchiness, creaminess and texture, and some parmesan for flavour. I'm also going to use a couple of slices of processed cheese to help melt those and bind them together. Also, these just happen to be the only two cheeses I have in my fridge at the moment. If you want to get fancy with your cheeses, go right ahead. For the outside of the sandwich, you're going to want some fairly firm cheese. Just to keep things simple, I'm using the same mix of mozzarella and parmesan for both the inside and the outside of the sandwich. I really like to add just a little pinch of fresh herbs to give the sandwich a little bit of extra flavour and some colour. And personally, I don't think you can get a much better flavour combo than cheese and chives. So I'm just going to pop out to grab some. Just let me get my shoes on and then we'll just take a quick walk out to the vegetable garden. It's always nice to have fresh herbs on hand to throw into things. Let's see, we've got some rosemary and some parsley. Where are those chives? We've got plenty of thyme growing here. Ooh, thyme could be really interesting, but I think I'll stick with chives today. Now where are they at? Ah, there we go, chives. That'll do just nicely. Well, that was a fun excursion. Right, now, where were we? When you're slicing chives, it's important to use a really sharp knife. A blunt knife tends to squash them and damage a lot of cells, which means you lose a lot of the delicate flavour. This is not a sharp knife. But it's late and I'm hungry, so it'll do. I'm going to start the cooking process off by toasting my bread. And for some reason I've chosen the messiest and most time-consuming way possible to do that by toasting it in a pan with some butter. In hindsight, I probably should have just popped it in the toaster. There's going to be more than enough fat in this with all the cheese. The reason for toasting the bread is twofold. Number one, it gives it more flavour. Toast has more flavour than bread, so toasting it on both sides adds twice as much flavour. The second is to dry the bread out a bit and give it some crunch. The bread's going to steam a bit when it's coated in cheese, so this is going to help to make sure it doesn't get soggy. And this seems to be taking forever. It's late and I'm hungry, so I'm going to call that done. Like I said, I really should have just popped it in the toaster. Now we can take our disappointingly blonde toasted bread and start assembling our sandwich. I'm going to start by placing down a slice of processed cheese, or American style cheese. This type of cheese is made by blending other cheeses together with some emulsifiers and other bits and bobs, and those emulsifiers are also going to help in blending our two cheeses together. This is a great trick. It means you can use pretty much any cheese you like and the emulsifiers will help to make it all melty and gooey. On top of that, I'm piling on a relatively generous amount of our cheese mix. Sprinkling on some finely sliced chives, then topping with another piece of processed cheese. This way all of our cheese and chive mix is completely surrounded by processed cheese, so as it all melts together, it'll mix together and become nice and melty. And then we're going to take our cheese sandwich and grill it. Well, fry it in a pan, I guess. Don't ask me why they call a pan-fried sandwich grilled. There's probably a reason, but I don't know it. And we're just going to toast this over a low to medium heat until both sides are toasty and the cheese is melty. Then we're going to pop that to one side and return the pan back to the heat. You know how some recipes are pretty standard and some recipes have a fun part? This next bit is definitely the fun part. You're going to want to make sure that you're doing this in your non-stickiest of non-stick pans. We're going to get a generous handful of our cheese mix and dump it straight into the hot pan. I'm going to continue to sprinkle some more cheese and spread that around a bit till we get a nice wide disc. I want to try and get even coverage of cheese so that when it melts there's no gaps in between. And I want to make this disc roughly big enough to cover the bottom of the sandwich and all 4 sides. We're then keeping this over a medium heat while the cheese melts. You'll notice the cheese goes through a few phases. First it'll melt, then as it bubbles you'll notice a lot of the moisture evaporating out. Then you'll notice the fat starts to separate out from the milk solids. Shortly after that you'll notice the cheese starts to get a little bit brown around the edges. Once it starts getting to around this point, that's when you want to add your sandwich back in. Give it a little press down just to make sure that it's nice and stuck to that cheese, and then let it go for a minute or two to start to brown and crisp up that cheese on the bottom. Now this is starting to look like it's just about ready. You can see the cheese has browned nicely around the edges. If you look through the bubbles, you can sort of tell that it's browning on the bottom, and the whole layer itself looks like it's firmed up but still flexible. Then we carefully put our hand on top to give it some support and flip it out of the pan. The next thing to do is carefully tuck the loose edges underneath the sandwich. Ow! Correction, we're going to leave this in the pan and fold up the sides. Ow! Alright, tough guy. Let's stop pretending we've got chef's fingers and put this aside for a little bit to cool. Next up, we're going to throw the remaining cheese into the hot pan while we run our fingers under some cold water and have a think about making better choices. We only really need enough cheese just to cover the remaining side. This looks like it's probably a bit more than we need. But hey, there's no such thing as too much cheese, right? When it's sufficiently melty, we'll do our very best to try and tuck the loose ends of the cheese underneath the sandwich now that they're actually cool enough to touch, and then we'll drop the sandwich down into the middle of the cheese. I've gone a little bit off center here, but I think we'll still be able to make this work. As that bottom layer of cheese toasts and crisps up, I'm just using the spatula to help to shape any loose cheese, maybe tucking some of it underneath here and there to keep a nice square shape. Once it's firmed up a bit, you can flip it over periodically to check on the progress, and as soon as it looks just as golden brown and lovely as the first side, it's done. And there we go, our finished, entirely encased in cheese, grilled cheese sandwich. I don't think it gets much more ultimate than that. I'm going to leave this to cool for a couple of minutes because that cheese inside is going to be really molten and probably dangerously hot. And would you look at that? It's kind of equal parts beauty and monstrosity both at the same time. All the goodness of a regular grilled cheese sandwich, but all wrapped up in a lovely golden brown layer of toasty cheese. Let's cut this open and see what we find. I hope you're ready for an epic cheese pull. Have a look at this. That processed cheese has done its job brilliantly and blended all the cheeses together into a nice, stretchy, creamy mess. That cheese pull was so good, I'm gonna have another crack. Yeah, that's pretty stretchy. So let's have a taste. Obviously, this is a pretty overindulgent sandwich. There's a whole lot of cheese in here. And it's really good. Even with the cheap, pre-shredded supermarket brand cheese, it's got a really big flavour hit. The processed cheese has melted everything together beautifully. The toasted cheese around the outside gives a lovely, nutty, toasty flavour and a really satisfying chew. And despite the absolutely obscene amount of cheese that's in this, there's still a subtle hint of chives coming through. So there we have my ultimate late night grilled cheese sandwich. If you've got any ideas on things I could do to make this more ultimate, please let me know in the comments. After completely encasing a sandwich in cheese, I'm kind of out of ideas. Unless I somehow infuse cheese into the bread itself. There's an idea. If you've enjoyed this video, please hit the like button. It really does help me out an awful lot. And if you're interested in any of my other late night cooking adventures, please consider subscribing. I hope you give this recipe a try. but do be careful not to burn your fingers. Thanks very much for your time, and happy snacking. I wonder if I can manage to get a third cheese pull out of this. Not quite. Close, but not quite.